This is the story of when Kashif Pervaiz ordered his girlfriend Antoinette to kill his wife Nazish. Yes, in this story of arrogance and ego, I'm going to tell you about the time a Pakistani American had his wife killed just to get her out of the way on August 16th, 2011. Kashif is Pakistani. I'm also Pakistani. Back during the time of these murders, Kashif was in his mid-20s, I was in my early 20s. Kashif lives in America, I live in America. During high school, Kashif dated Bengali girls. My first love was a Bengali girl. Kashif has kids, I have a son. And more importantly, in our commonalities, Kashif was a moron and I am an imbecile. So I think you'd agree there's no better person to understand his psyche than me. And that is the theme in which this story must be told. For us to understand Kashif, we must enter the world of the bizarre and the silly. Now, Kashif in his younger days loved dating his sister's friends. He was known to be quite a controlling person. It is said by those who spoke of him that he did not trust anyone, particularly women. Now, Kashif, you have to understand, he's a Muslim, and I am a Muslim. There are differences between the Pakistani American and the Pakistani Briton. And when I say Pakistani, I mean Muslim, because all Pakistanis, 99.9% of them, are Muslim. And the upbringing between America and Britain is very different. See, the Pakistanis in Britain, where I'm from, they view Britain as invaders of Middle Eastern lands, whereas the American Pakistani views America as liberators from poverty. You understand this difference? And with this, Pakistanis in America are far more likely to integrate into Western ideology than those in Britain. Now, I'm not criticizing, I'm not saying anybody's right and wrong. I'm trying to paint a picture on the kind of environment that Kashif was under. And I can say this with conviction because I've lived in both environments. Now, in terms of his family, Kashif had a sister called Nabila. Nabila was in a very abusive marriage. It is reported that her ex-husband would wake her up in the middle of the night and force her to clean the floors with a toothbrush. She unfortunately died of dehydration a year after Kashif murdered his wife. His father owned a grocery store in Brooklyn, and his sister Zareen ended up being sent to Pakistan at the age of 16 to get married to someone she barely knew. Her husband came to America, had a child, but then under mysterious circumstances got into trouble with law enforcement and then fled back to Pakistan. To further indicate the depravity of this family, Kashif's sister Zareen one time was in school and people noticed a cast on her hand. Consider a whole bunch of plasters, a whole bunch of band-aids, you know, when you break your arm. And it was revealed that their mother was annoyed at their other sister and she took it out on Zareen by banging her hand on a wooden board. Now, those who knew Kashif described him as arrogant, manipulative, and narcissistic. And in the research I did, I thought to myself, today, narcissism is a buzzword, right? It's quite fashionable to use, but I wouldn't use the word narcissistic. When I look at the research and see what kind of person he was just a twat. Now, Antoinette, she met Kashif in January 2010. They started out as friends and slowly became lovers. Antoinette was a bright student and she was pressured by her family to succeed. But what she didn't know, the more and more she got to know Kashif, was that he was married. And this is a dilemma a lot of Pakistani men in the Western world face. See, are you a Muslim or are you American? As Islam and America stand for two different things. They have different values. And when I say Islam, I'm using Islam and Pakistani in the same context. See, the struggle for identity is rife within the Pakistani psyche in the Western world, male or female. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of men end up living this double life, where they look like they have the 2.4 generic married life, but at the same time, they want to have their cake and eat it too by having a girlfriend. And more often than not, this girlfriend is a non-Muslim. Now, for a lot of Pakistani male or females, their parents write their lives for them. Their parents end up telling them, you're going to this school, you're going to study this subject, you're going to marry this girl, you're going to hang out with these friends. So you got to ask yourself, why are the parents so dominating and domineering? Well, the answer is vanity. The parents want to be able to report back home to Pakistan and their peers in society, Oh, look at my son, look what he's achieved. Oh, look at my daughter, look what school she's going to. Oh, look at the house that they have. Oh, look at the grandkids I have. And with this vain sense of self-worth, marriage is a added layer of success. So they pressured Kashif into having an arranged marriage to a girl back home. Now Kashif refused. He didn't mind the stuff where they told him he has to study architecture and go to this school. He didn't mind any of that. But where he did take a little stand where he couldn't compromise on was an arranged marriage. But luckily for his parents, he found Nazish, who was a smart girl. She was Pakistani, she was Muslim, she was also in America. But the point here is that he didn't marry Nazish because he fell in love with her. He married Nazish just to keep his parents quiet. Instead of telling his parents, no, I'm not doing it, I don't want to get married, get off my case, he avoided the problem by causing more problems. See, marriage is seen by my older generation as a successful part of life. It's a key part of having a good life. I've mentioned this before, but for a lot of women in the Pakistani community, they see marriage as the main reason why they were plucked out of poverty and now live a lavish lifestyle. I don't mean lavish as in they're rich, I mean lavish in comparison to their friends and family back home. So if you take the vanity, the historical events of immigration, when I talked about the British and the Pakistani mindset, where you go from poor to rich, coupled by the fact that Kashif was quite an arrogant kid and a twat who thought the solution to not marrying a girl was to find Nazish and marry her, what are you going to end up with? A marriage and a life of inconvenience. And it was this decision right here in the story where Kashif was at a crossroads in his life. He couldn't be a man and take a stand. He instead bowed down and dragged Nazish with him as they got married in 2005. Now going back to Antoinette, Kashif told his wife that he had to move to Boston as he was accepted into a Harvard PhD program. This is where he's met Antoinette and then he started his affair. Now a couple of years later, as he's going through his affair and is growing even more distant from his wife says to him, the only way this marriage is not going to work is if me and the kids come to Boston. I mean, of course, it's not easy raising kids by yourself, but Kashif agreed. And the reason why he agreed is because he wasn't man enough to do what he wanted to do, which was walking away. Now, I don't know this for sure, but I think this was the time when he told Antoinette, hey, by the way, I'm married, I have kids, and they're moving to Boston when the semester starts. So now we move to August the 16th, 2011. It's the month of Ramadan, and Kashif and his wife and his kids are in New Jersey spending the month with his family. Him and his wife take their son for a walk, and out of nowhere, a gunman appears. He shoots Nazish immediately in the heart and she dies. Kashif is shot, has a gunshot wound, but he's alive. As the police get to the scene, Kashif tells them that 3 men jumped out of nowhere, called him a terrorist and shot them both. Now using the CCTV footage, the police, who at first were quite baffled by the events because nobody ever complained of a hate crime in Boonton, New Jersey where this took place, they spotted a car that was rather suspicious. And it turns out this car's license plate ran back to Massachusetts. Now, whilst Kashif was in the hospital, the police thought to themselves, well, if somebody calls you a terrorist and shoots you, it's a hate crime. Therefore, hate crimes, generally there's an event that leads up to it. So they asked him, did you receive any hate calls? Have you received any hate mail? Have you had any hate come to your house? And they asked him if they could view his phone, and Kashif refused, which they found very suspicious. This was the first alarm bell for the police. And as with his parents earlier in his life, the moment you push Kashif a little bit, he's gonna crack like a nut, and eventually he confessed to the police he has a girlfriend. Now another sign for the police, another tell sign, and this also gave an indication on the kind of character Kashif was, his wife was shot around 11 p.m. and at 2 a.m. where they're questioning him, he starts telling police that his wife was an awful mother, she wasn't a good wife, she was greedy, materialistic, kept spending his money. And when the police questioned Nazish's family, the family stated that Kashif wasn't happy in the marriage, he was physically and verbally abusive to Nazish, and in fact, the family showed the police a text message from Nazish, and this text message said, he's abusing me, he's physically hurting me, I don't know where this is going to end, but if I end up dead, just know it was him. And this is why I used the word inconvenience earlier. You see, Nazish to Kashif was literally a hindrance. She was a burden. He ignored her all week, And then when he came home on the weekend and she questioned him, hey, where you been? Hey, what the hell is going on? He just saw this as a big headache and she was just getting in the way of how he wanted to live. And this is also why I said earlier that when he first told his parents, hey, I met this girl Nazish, this is where it all began. When you look back at this story, you can pinpoint where the scale was about to be tipped into the absurd. Now, after the police went through Kashif's phone and they saw the steamy relationship between Antoinette and Kashif, they realized that the days leading up to the murder and on the night of the murder, Antoinette was in New Jersey. And knowing her patterns, there was no reason for her to ever be in New Jersey. Now, there is a question here, and the question is, okay, Kashif, if you didn't want to be with her, why couldn't you walk away? Why lie? Why be insincere? And the reason why he couldn't is because filing for divorce would have brought shame onto his family. Furthermore, him telling his parents, I found this girl Antoinette, she's not a Muslim, but I want to be with her, would have brought more shame onto his family. Kashif was more concerned about the perception of his family than the safety and security of his wife and kids. The revelations of Kashif's character get more and more sinister. During the interrogation with the police, it was revealed Kashif tried to get black magic practitioners to move his wife out the equation. In his head, he's thinking, can you give her some kind of disease or can you kill her directly? A rumor has it, Yashi paid around $5,000 for special prayers and spells to rid his wife. He wanted them to make her crazy, have her commit suicide. That would have been ideal for him. See, in Islam, black magic is referring to contact with demons. The demons are referred to as the unseen, because ultimately that's what they are. I mean, many of you may not believe in spirits and all that kind of stuff. I'm just giving you this information so you can understand what was going through Kashif's head. He wanted his wife out the way and he was willing to do everything except being a man and just being honest. Now, the way this would have worked if these practitioners were for real and if they complied is they, the practitioners, who claim to be in contact with demons, would send a demon, and these demons can travel at the speed of light. They'd send the demon to Nazish. The demon would have played with her, would have toyed with her, in the metaphorical sense. He would interrupt her sleep, make her children sick, make her sick, move objects to make her think she's going crazy, make her paranoid. And again, I know you're thinking this was just hocus pocus mumbo jumbo. I know. I'm just trying to reiterate what Kashif was willing to do to get rid of his wife rather than just being a man. Now, during the night of the murder, Antoinette told police she waited in the car and she saw the couple walk outside the house. This was planned by her and Kashif, and Antoinette confirmed she was a willing participant in ridding his wife. My guess is she did it out of love, in some sick, twisted way. But what I find more sinister about Antoinette this time, and where her sinister nature for me reached its peak during this entire debacle, is when she saw the couple walking outside, what she did not anticipate was their 3-year-old son being with them. Yet somehow she still had the desire to continue. Now that to me is a different level. I don't know what the word is, but to still be going through with killing the mother when the 3-year-old child is there, that's the next level. Again, I don't know what the word is to describe it, but you know what I'm trying to say. And eventually Kashif was sentenced to around 75 years and Antoinette was sentenced to around 40 years. And now we come to my conclusion, and I can only tell you this conclusion if I'm sitting there with you, talking to you as a friend. This isn't a case where I can't tell you the true depths of this by being professional. And it's clear to me, Kashif was just a dickhead, bruv. For him, it was all about the flex. Right? Later, it was revealed. I mean, he told people he went to Columbia and he told people he went to Harvard. Right? Now, the police, when they did, when they were investigating, they didn't find any record of him in Columbia and they didn't find any record of him in Harvard. Maybe, I can't remember, but maybe they have found a record in Harvard, but either way, he flunked both schools if he even went there. So why? Why do all this? In high school, he thought he was a big man on campus. I'm dating this girl, I'm dating that girl, so he can go and flex to his friends. And if you look at the way his family is with the death of his sister and then the strict nature of his parents, where essentially they took the ideals of Pakistan, brought them to America, and in some weird malleable sense managed to combine the two. And it shows in the case of Antoinette and Kashif that pressure is a real thing. To me, this isn't pressure though. Pressure is when you can't feed your kids. Pressure is when you can't provide for your family. Pressure is when you're about to lose your home. Do you know how many times my parents have told me when I was younger, we're getting you married, or you need to start thinking about marriage? I just ignored it. Because what's going to happen? What's going to happen? My parents want me to get married. No, I'm not doing it. Okay? what's going to happen? What were they going to do to Kashif? Give him a smack? Okay, you're better off taking a smack and a telling off from your dad than doing all the shit you did. Now, luckily for me, my parents weren't strict and I was never really put in this dilemma. We had conversations with my parents about me getting married and all that kind of stuff, but there was never, it was like, no, mom, I'm not doing it. And they're like, all right, no problem. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But with Kashif, his family, and 100 other families I've come across, they all end up having the same dilemmas. They are caught between a civilization in Pakistan that has conservative values and a civilization in America that has modern liberalism. And while they're jumping around from one to the next trying to figure out what the fuck am I supposed to do, in this identity crisis that I mentioned earlier, the vain, arrogant, egotistical nature of people like Kashif at times end up with the most heinous of situations. And the last word I'll say on this is, you binge true crime, I binge true crime. A lot of the times when you see criminals, there'll be something about their childhood where they got some kind of abuse. It doesn't excuse their actions as an adult, but it provides some context, right? You'll see some people who, abuse children, they were abused as kids themselves. You'll see people who they kill someone else out of jealousy or whatever. There's no logical reasoning for it, but sometimes you can follow the steps and you're like, okay, that's the reason why. But in the case of Kashif, there was literally no need. He had a very, very decent upbringing. I know his parents were strict, but he had a house, he had money, he had a car, he had friends, he went to school. Back home in Pakistan, they're eating one meal a day, living off $5, whilst here he is living in New York or New Jersey or whatever, living the high life in comparison to where his family's from. Every single thing in this story was his own doing. There was no mitigating circumstances. There was no mental deficiencies. It was just simply him being a dickhead. Why don't you guys comment? Tell me what you think.